Before the money came, before the pride grew, there was a woman who believed. If you believe love should never forget sacrifice, like this video and subscribe for more emotional stories. Jerry married Charity at a time when life had stripped him of confidence and comfort. He had no big job, no respected name, and no guarantee that tomorrow would be better than today. All he had were tired hands, restless dreams, and a heart full of fear about the future. Charity saw all of that, and stayed. Their wedding was small. No expensive hall. No shining decorations. Just two people standing before God, promising loyalty when nothing else was certain. Charity did not marry Jerry for what he had. She married him for who she believed he could become. Charity came from a very poor background. She grew up wearing second-hand clothes, eating simple meals, and learning early that gratitude mattered more than luxury. She did not know fashion trends or high society manners. What she knew was how to love deeply, how to respect quietly, and how to stand firm when life was unkind. When Jerry struggled to find work, Charity never complained. She woke up early every morning, tying her worn scarf carefully before stepping out to help wherever she could. Sometimes she sold small items. Sometimes she cleaned houses. Sometimes she cooked meals that barely filled the pot, but she always served them with a smile. At night, when Jerry lay awake staring at the ceiling, Charity would sit beside him and hold his hand. She spoke softly, reminding him that hardship was not failure, and delay was not denial. When bills piled up and rejection letters broke his spirit, she never reminded him of his weakness. Instead, she prayed. Charity prayed when Jerry slept. She prayed when he cried quietly in the bathroom. She prayed when hope felt thin and fragile. She prayed not for wealth, but for strength. Not for status, but for peace. I will not let this season break us, she told herself silently. There were days Jerry came home angry, frustrated by the world that refused to open its doors to him. Charity absorbed those moments without fighting back. She understood pain can make even good men heavy. She believed love meant patience, not applause. But how many people truly stand by someone when nothing is working? Charity never asked Jerry to prove himself to her. She already believed. She ironed his old shirts carefully before interviews. She encouraged him even when her own dreams were paused. She chose hope over bitterness again and again. Jerry noticed her efforts, but slowly, as time passed, he began to see them as normal. As expected. As something that would always be there. And that was the danger. Because love that sacrifices quietly is often taken for granted. Charity did not know that the same hands she held during his lowest days would one day hesitate to hold hers in public. She did not know that her prayers were building a future where her presence would be questioned. For now, she simply loved him. Fully. Faithfully. Without conditions. And that love became the foundation of everything Jerry would later call success. She supported him emotionally, prayed for him, and sacrificed quietly, never knowing that the love that built him would one day be forgotten. Success doesn't change everyone, but it reveals who they truly are. Jerry's life did not transform overnight, but the change was steady and undeniable. A new job offer came first, then a promotion. His salary increased. His name began to carry weight. Slowly, the man who once waited in long lines for opportunities was now being invited into air-conditioned offices and quiet meetings. With success came new people. Colleagues spoke with confidence, dressed sharply, and laughed loudly at expensive restaurants. Jerry began spending more time outside, attending meetings that ended late and conversations that felt important. He learned new words, new habits, and a new way of carrying himself. At home, Charity noticed the difference. Jerry no longer sat beside her for long evening talks. His phone was always in his hand. His mind always somewhere else. When Charity spoke, he listened, but only halfway. Her simple questions about his day felt small compared to the world he was entering. Charity continued to support him, just as she always had. She prepared his meals, prayed for his protection, and celebrated his progress quietly. But Jerry no longer looked at her the same way. The clothes Charity wore, once familiar, now felt outdated to him. Her silence, which once felt peaceful, now felt uncomfortable. Her simplicity, which once felt safe, now felt embarrassing. She doesn't fit into this new life, he thought. Jerry began to correct her in public. He spoke over her. He avoided bringing her around his colleagues. When events were mentioned, he would change the topic or promise to explain later. But later never came. Charity sensed the distance growing between them. She tried harder to please him, unaware that effort was no longer what he admired. What once felt like love was slowly becoming tolerance. Is success still a blessing when it teaches you to look down on the hands that lifted you up? Jerry admired himself in the mirror more often now. He enjoyed the respect he received from strangers. Their praise fed something inside him that Charity never did, his ego. And with every compliment, his humility faded a little more. At work, he spoke proudly about his achievements. At home, he spoke less. When Charity asked if something was wrong, he brushed it off with a tired smile. He did not want to hurt her, but he also did not want to explain himself. Because explaining would mean admitting the truth. Charity still believed in the man she married. She believed the distance was temporary. She believed success was simply testing their patience. But Jerry was already being tested in another way. Not by poverty. Not by struggle. By pride. And pride has a quiet way of changing hearts long before it changes behavior. Slowly, admiration turned into ego, and humility was replaced with embarrassment toward the wife who once meant everything. He didn't hit her, he erased her. The invitations began to arrive, gala dinners, networking events, private parties where success glittered in gold and crystal. Jerry would read them, nod, and then look at Charity. Her plain dress, her modest shoes, her quiet manner, it no longer fit the image he wanted to show the world. "Why can't you dress better for once?" he asked one evening, his voice sharp but disguised as concern. Charity's hands trembled slightly as she folded the old dress she had spent hours preparing. He doesn't see me anymore, she thought, her heart heavy, but her voice stayed calm. Jerry began to lie. Events were a men only or work-related. He said it casually, as if reality could be rewritten with words. Charity, trusting and loyal, accepted these excuses. She believed that marriage required endurance, that love could heal distance, that patience could bridge any gap. But each lie was a war between them. He criticized her small joys, the way she laughed at a simple joke, the way she prepared his favorite tea, the way she spoke freely to friends. Everything that once felt like love now embarrassed him. He whispered to himself, "They'll think she's too simple, too ordinary." And so he began to remove her from the picture, slowly, silently, as though she were a mistake he could erase without confrontation. Charity noticed it all. She noticed the sideways glances he gave when she entered a room. She noticed the way he would avoid holding her hand in public. She noticed the subtle scoffs when she mentioned a childhood story or a humble memory. Every day, her world became smaller. She withdrew, not out of fear, but out of respect for the man she loved. Why must love feel like shame? Despite the growing coldness, she did not yell. She did not demand answers. She prayed at night, tears tracing quiet paths down her cheeks. She reminded herself that this was only a season, that hearts could change, that love could still find its way through pride. And so she endured. Every insult he threw at her clothing, Every snide remark about her family, she took in silently. Every ignored call and avoided invitation, she absorbed without complaint. Her patience was not weakness, it was hope. Hope that he would remember the woman who had stood beside him when the world did not. Maybe one day he'll see me again, she whispered to herself in the darkness, wrapping her arms around the quiet comfort of her own heart. But with every passing event she missed, every moment she waited while he flaunted a new world, the silence grew heavier, like a storm cloud gathering strength. Charity's heart remained gentle, but the tension in the air was undeniable. She did not fight. She did not demand. She endured. And in that endurance, there was a quiet dignity no one could take from her. Charity noticed the change but chose silence, believing patience could save her marriage. When pride meets praise, loyalty becomes fragile. Jerry's life had begun to sparkle with the promise of success, and with that shine came new attention. One evening, at a business mixer filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of expensive perfume, he met Lily. She was dazzling, bright smiles, designer dress, perfectly manicured nails. Her voice was smooth, her words flattering, her eyes always on him. "Wow, you've done so well," she said, leaning slightly closer. "I've never seen anyone rise so fast." Jerry felt a warmth he had not felt in months. Charity had always celebrated him quietly, without fuss, without admiration shouted in public. Lily's praise was loud, intoxicating, addictive. For the first time in a long while, Jerry felt like he was being truly seen. But Lily did not stop there. She laughed at his jokes, ones that Charity had heard 1,000 times. She mocked the simplicity of his home life, the modest way he had once lived, and the quiet woman who had stood beside him all those years. "She doesn't even know Charity, and maybe that's the point," Jerry thought, a pang of guilt hidden beneath the rising thrill of attention. Slowly, he began to seek Lily's company more often. He told himself it was harmless, that he was only enjoying conversation, only sharing his successes with someone who understood their value. But every smile she gave, every compliment she whispered, chipped away at the quiet bond he shared with his wife. He started comparing the two women in his mind, Charity, with her quiet love and steadfast support, and Lily, with her laughter, sparkle, and constant affirmation. One felt like home, the other felt like admiration on steroids. One nurtured his soul, the other fed his ego. How easily can admiration become a cage? Jerry's meetings with Lily became longer. His calls to Charity became shorter. He began to hide his time away, crafting stories about late work and urgent errands. Every lie seemed small at first, like a shadow over a bright room, but shadows grow. And in those shadows, his heart began to drift. Charity noticed his absence, but she did not confront him harshly. She prayed, hoping the distance was only a test, only a season of struggle they would overcome together. She still believed in the man who had once loved her without condition, even as he slowly replaced that love with something hollow, shimmering, and loud. Jerry felt powerful, admired, and important. And in that feeling, he allowed himself to forget the woman who had built him up when he had nothing. He forgot the quiet strength that had prayed for him in the nights when despair pressed heavy on his chest. Maybe she'll never understand, he thought, even as he justified his growing closeness to Lily. It began with flattery, then laughter, then emotional intimacy. Each moment with Lily was a thread pulled from the bond he shared with Charity, leaving a space that only he could fill with lies, excuses, and selfish desire. Encouraged by attention, Jerry starts an affair and emotionally replaces his wife. One invitation was about to expose every lie. Jerry returned home one evening with a crisp envelope in his hand. The embossed letters shimmered under the dim light of the hallway. It was an invitation to the most prestigious business gala of the year, a gathering of the city's most influential leaders, investors, and decision-makers. Attendance could open doors he had only dreamed of. Opportunities that could define the next 10 years of his life rested in those pages. But there was one condition: he had to come accompanied by his wife. Charity, the woman who had been his silent supporter through sleepless nights and endless struggle, must be by his side. Jerry held the envelope tightly, his mind a whirlwind. He knew she had the simplicity, the modest dress, the quiet manner that might not match the grandeur of the event. He felt a familiar heat of embarrassment rising in his chest, a shame he couldn't seem to shake. How could the woman who once built me up suddenly feel so out of place? He thought, tension knotting his stomach. He pictured the room, chandeliers sparkling above polished floors, business magnates chatting confidently, elegant couples gliding past. And then he imagined Charity, standing quietly, watching him, smiling softly, completely unaware of how out of place she might seem in this world. Jerry's heart raced with a mixture of ambition and fear. This was a chance he couldn't pass up, a night that could accelerate everything he had worked so hard to achieve. And yet, it was the same night that could expose his deepest insecurities, the discomfort he felt toward the very woman who had loved him without question. His gaze drifted to the mirror. He straightened his tie, adjusted his jacket, and then glanced at Charity as she hummed softly in the kitchen, preparing dinner as she always did. The thought of her walking beside him at the gala, praised for nothing other than her love and loyalty, made his pulse quicken, not with pride, but with a quiet panic. Why must ambition always come with a price? Minutes stretched into hours as he wrestled with the decision. On one hand, the gala promised recognition, influence, and validation. On the other, standing with Charity felt risky. Not risky for her, but risky for him, his image, his carefully constructed persona, his desire to be admired by a world that no longer valued humble love. Finally, the thought came to him with a dangerous clarity: there was a solution. He could attend the gala with someone who reflected his new world, someone flashy, admired, and perfectly suited to the expectations of that room. Someone who would make him look bigger, brighter, more important. No one would know, he reassured himself, his pulse quickening, a thrill mixed with guilt fluttering in his chest. And just like that, Jerry made his choice. A choice that would feel victorious at first but would carry consequences far heavier than the glittering chandeliers of the gala could ever hide. Torn between ambition and shame, he makes a dangerous decision. He thought the night belonged to him. Jerry arrived at the gala with Lily by his side, the city lights reflecting off the polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. The valet opened the car door, and he stepped out confidently, holding Lily's hand as if the world had always belonged to them. Every photographer's flash felt like affirmation, every greeting a silent nod to his success. "This is my wife, Lily," he introduced her with a smile, watching as heads turned and whispers followed. The name rolled off his tongue effortlessly, replacing Charity with ease in a world that no longer required humility. For a moment, he felt invincible, untouchable. Lily laughed at his jokes, whispered flattering words, and leaned closer as they moved through the crowd. Jerry soaked it all in. The admiration, the sparkle, the attention, it felt like validation for every small humiliation he had once feared. Every moment with Lily was a carefully crafted illusion of a perfect life. No one will ever see the old me, he thought, a small thrill rising in his chest. He mingled with investors and business leaders, introducing Lily as if she had always belonged in that world. He pointed to her designer dress, her confident smile, and felt a wave of pride wash over him. How easily he had replaced the woman who had built him from nothing with someone who fed his ego and polished his image. Yet, amid the laughter and applause, there was a faint, almost invisible knot of unease in his chest. Charity's face floated briefly in his mind, a quiet smile, a hand held during late nights, prayers whispered when hope felt impossible. He shook it off quickly, telling himself she was just part of the past, a chapter already closed. Why does escaping the past sometimes feel like a betrayal of the heart? The gala seemed endless. Champagne flowed, conversation sparkled, and Jerry moved through it all with the confidence of a man who believed he had everything. He watched Lily charm and captivate everyone around her, and for the first time in years, he felt fully seen, not for his struggles, not for his humility, but for the image he projected. And yet, in the quiet corners of his mind, a whisper lingered, what if this world of admiration comes at a cost I cannot undo? But he ignored it. For now, he was untouchable, admired, envied. He believed the past, the simple life, the woman who had never demanded recognition, was irrelevant. Charity, the wife who had stood by him in poverty, was erased from this night. And in his mind, that erasure was victory. He smiled at Lily, feeling a sense of triumph. He had conquered shame. He had stepped beyond his past. And he believed, with every heartbeat and every admiring glance, that he had finally escaped it. He believes he has finally escaped his past. The woman he hid was the woman everyone respected. The room buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses, filled with the city's most influential business minds. Jerry moved through it confidently, introducing Lily as his wife, smiling at admiring eyes, convinced he had curated the perfect image. Every step he took felt like proof that he had escaped the shadows of his past. Then, the murmurs shifted. The chatter paused. The crowd's attention turned to the grand entrance. Charity walked in. Not quietly. Not hesitantly. She entered the room like she owned it, because she did. The glow of her presence drew every gaze, and the conversation melted into whispers of respect and admiration. Her posture radiated authority. Her eyes scanned the room with calm confidence. Every person she passed nodded in recognition, in awe, or in deference. Jerry froze. His pulse quickened. The room, this glamorous, glittering space where he had thought he belonged, had been claimed by the very woman he had hidden away. It can't be her, he thought, disbelief sharp as ice in his chest. The host, a distinguished executive, stepped forward, smiling warmly. Everyone, please welcome the leader behind tonight's event, Charity Williams. A silence fell, the kind that swallows voices and leaves hearts racing. Jerry could feel the weight of every pair of eyes turning toward him, toward Lily, and finally settling on the woman he had once mocked in his mind for her simplicity. Lily's confident smile faltered. She shifted slightly, unsure how to respond. Jerry's throat tightened. All the rehearsed words, the introductions, the proud display, suddenly meaningless. The admiration he had chased, the persona he had carefully built, crumbled under the reality of Charity's presence. Charity spoke with ease, outlining the purpose of the evening, engaging each guest with intelligence, grace, and authority. Every statement she made commanded respect, every glance conveyed vision. She was not only the owner, but the heart of the room, the person everyone had come to see. And Jerry, who had once felt ashamed of her humble beginnings, realized that he had been blind. The woman he had hidden, the woman he had judged for her simplicity, was the one everyone truly respected. She had built an empire quietly, without noise, without boasting, and without needing him to validate her worth. How could he have been so foolish? He felt a twisting knot of guilt, embarrassment, and awe all at once. His chest ached with the weight of his choices. Every flirtation, every lie, every step he had taken away from Charity now felt like a betrayal amplified by the room's reverent silence. I was so wrong to doubt her, he thought, his ego crumbling beneath the truth that had always been there. Charity was more than he had ever imagined, more than he deserved, and far beyond anyone he had tried to replace her with. The realization hit him with staggering force. The woman he had been ashamed of owned the room, and, more painfully, she had always owned his heart. Jerry realizes the woman he was ashamed of owns the room. Silence spoke louder than anger ever could. The room, still buzzing from Charity's commanding entrance, grew even quieter as she approached Jerry and Lily. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. Her calm presence alone carried a weight that made every word she would speak feel like truth incarnate. "Jerry," she said softly, her voice steady but unyielding, "I see you brought someone else tonight, claiming her as your wife." The words were simple, almost understated, but the effect was seismic. Heads turned. Whispers erupted like soft ripples across a still pond, and every eye now focused on the man who had tried to erase his past and rewrite his story with deception. How could I have been so blind? Jerry thought, panic rising. His carefully constructed image, his pride, all crumbled under the quiet force of Charity's dignity. She continued, unhurried, unshaken. "Trust is not earned by appearances. Respect is not commanded by charm. Integrity is built over years, and it is fragile when betrayed." Her gaze swept across the room, acknowledging every witness to his deceit. Jerry opened his mouth, searching for words, for excuses, for some way to reclaim control. But no words came. Every line he had rehearsed in his mind evaporated in the presence of her poise. With deliberate calm, Charity addressed the board and key investors. She outlined the situation without emotion, without melodrama, simply the facts. Jerry had misrepresented his personal life to secure a place in their deal. The audience, seeing her composure and honesty, immediately understood the breach of trust. The deal, years in the making, crumbled. Phones buzzed. Decisions were rescinded. Agreements were paused. And Jerry, who had chased prestige and admiration, realized he had lost more than he could measure. "I built my success on shame and lies, and now it's gone," he thought, the weight of his choices settling like a stone in his chest. Charity turned to him then, her expression calm, resolute, and unbroken. "This marriage cannot continue," she said simply. "I loved you when there was nothing, but I cannot stand by while deceit replaces loyalty. I will not diminish my dignity for your ego." Jerry felt a cold emptiness fill him, the reality of his failures searing deeper than any insult or criticism could. Lily, still stunned and unsure, realized the truth too. This was not a woman to be trifled with, nor a man to admire lightly. Charity walked away from the table, leaving a silence so powerful it echoed louder than any shouting could have. Every person in the room understood, her integrity had won where pride and deception had failed. And as Jerry stood frozen, he saw, finally, the strength he had once ignored, the quiet, unwavering power of the woman who had loved him when he had nothing, who now held the room, the truth, and the respect of everyone present. The deal is cancelled based on integrity, and Charity ends the marriage with dignity. He lost everything chasing pride, she gained peace by choosing herself. The days after the gala were a storm for Jerry. News of the misrepresentation spread quickly. His colleagues whispered, his investors hesitated, and every opportunity he had fought so hard to secure evaporated. The prestige he had chased, the admiration he had craved, slipped from his fingers like sand. Lily, once a partner in his illusions, walked away quietly, leaving him alone with the hollow echo of his own choices. The glamour, the applause, the false pride, none of it remained. Jerry wandered through empty offices and cold hallways, realizing that everything he had gained through deception had vanished. Was all this ambition worth losing the one person who truly mattered? Meanwhile, Charity moved forward with grace. She returned to her work, commanding respect not through fear or control, but through her integrity, vision, and unwavering commitment to what was right. Her calm presence inspired loyalty, trust, and admiration. She was stronger for the trials, wiser for the betrayals, and freer than she had ever been. Charity's mornings were filled with purpose, her nights with quiet satisfaction. She no longer measured her worth by someone else's approval or pride. She had learned that walking away from disrespect was not weakness, but a testament to strength and self-respect. Every challenge she faced reminded her that dignity could not be bought, borrowed, or replaced, it could only be lived. I may have lost him, but I have not lost myself, she thought, smiling softly as she reviewed her plans for the company. Peace filled her in a way that power or wealth never could have. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, had claimed a freedom far greater than anything Jerry had ever understood. Jerry, by contrast, felt the sharp sting of regret every day. The reputation he had destroyed, the trust he had broken, and the love he had dismissed, all left scars that could not be erased. Each time he heard Charity's name praised in the city, each time her achievements were celebrated without him, he was reminded of the cost of arrogance and shame. And yet, in this painful contrast, the lesson was clear: one person had gained peace, strength, and dignity. The other had lost everything in pursuit of false pride. Charity continued to rise, respected, admired, and serene. Jerry remained a cautionary tale in the halls he once hoped to dominate. The world watched, and those who had been dazzled by ambition learned that character, respect, and self-worth are worth infinitely more than fleeting approval. Charity moves forward in peace, learning that walking away from disrespect is strength, not failure.